The rooftop party at the Meridian Hotel should have been my wife's moment of triumph. Instead, it became the night I discovered exactly what kind of woman I'd married for 7 years. I'm Mason Reddan, and I fix things for a living. Network systems, server crashes, corrupted databases. Give me a broken computer and I'll make it sing. What I couldn't fix was standing right next to me in a black cocktail dress, laughing at something her boss had whispered in her ear. Elara worked in marketing for Pinnacle Communications, one of those glass tower companies that charged corporations 6 figures to rebrand their mediocrity. Tonight was their quarterly celebration, and she'd insisted I come as her +1. "You'll love meeting everyone," she'd said, "especially Hayes." Hayes Rellin stood 6'2" with silver hair and the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. He owned the room the way some men own expensive watches, casually, but making sure everyone noticed. As Pinnacle's creative director, he commanded respect and substantial bonuses. As my wife's supervisor, he commanded something else entirely. The party buzzed with the usual corporate energy. Marketing executives compared vacation homes while junior associates nursed single drinks and laughed too loudly at unfunny jokes. I recognized the hierarchy immediately. I'd seen it in every office building I'd consulted for over the past decade. "Mason builds computer networks," Elara explained to a cluster of her colleagues. "He's very technical." The way she said technical made it sound like a communicable disease. Her friends, Jenna and Vera, nodded politely before returning to their conversation about weekend spa retreats. I'd met them before at company picnics and holiday parties. They treated me like furniture that occasionally spoke. "How fascinating," Hayes said, extending a manicured hand. "Information technology must be quite stable." His handshake lasted exactly 3 seconds. Professional, dismissive, calculated. Everything about Hayes Rellin was calculated, from his Italian leather shoes to his carefully tousled hair. He looked like someone who'd never changed his own oil or unclogged a drain. "It pays the bills," I replied. "I'm sure it does." His smile never wavered, though I imagine it lacks the creative satisfaction that Elara finds in her work. She's quite talented, you know, very responsive to direction. The comment hung in the air like expensive cologne, too heavy, too obvious, too intimate for a professional relationship. Elara blushed and touched Hayes's arm, a gesture I'd seen her make countless times over the past 6 months. "Hayes has been mentoring me," she explained. "He's teaching me about client relations." "Among other things," Hayes added with that same calculated smile. I should have felt anger, should have felt the masculine urge to defend my territory, to posture and threaten. Instead, I felt something colder. Curiosity. The kind of detached interest I brought to diagnosing system failures. Something was broken here, and I wanted to understand exactly what. The party continued around us. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a jazz quartet played in the corner. The city sprawled below us through floor-to-ceiling windows, all lights and movement and anonymous lives. Up here, we were insulated from reality by money and altitude. "Elara tells me you work from home quite often," Hayes continued. "That must be lonely." "I travel for client sites," I said. "But yes, I'm home more than most husbands." How convenient for everyone involved. The conversation felt like verbal chess, each comment a calculated move toward some predetermined outcome. Hayes was probing, testing boundaries, establishing dominance. Elara watched our exchange with nervous energy, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand. "Mason's very understanding," she said quickly. "About my work schedule, I mean. All the late meetings and client dinners." "Essential for career advancement," Hayes agreed. "Some opportunities require flexibility." That word, flexibility, carried weight beyond its syllables. It suggested compromise, accommodation, bending to circumstances, or bending to people. I filed it away with the rest of the evening's observations. Jenna and Vera had been whispering throughout our conversation, their voices low, but their glances obvious. They looked at Elara with something between envy and amusement, like spectators at a particularly entertaining sporting event. "We were just discussing the Henderson account," Vera announced suddenly. "Such a challenging client." "Hayes handled it beautifully," Jenna added. "Those long strategy sessions really paid off." "Very long sessions," Elara agreed, her cheeks flushing deeper. Hayes's smile widened. "Success requires dedication. Some projects demand personal attention well beyond normal business hours." The subtext was becoming text. These people weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. They were enjoying themselves, reveling in their shared secret while I stood there like an oblivious husband in a situation comedy. "Speaking of dedication," Hayes said, checking his gold watch, "I should probably head out soon, early morning tomorrow." "Oh no," Elara said, her disappointment genuine. "The party's just getting started." "Unfortunately, I have commitments." He paused, letting his eyes linger on her face. "Unless, of course, you're free tonight?" The question dropped into our conversation like a stone into still water. Ripples of tension spread outward, touching everyone in our little circle. Jenna and Vera exchanged knowing looks. Elara's breathing quickened. The jazz quartet played on, oblivious to the drama unfolding 20 feet away. "I'm free tonight," Elara said softly. Hayes's smile became predatory. "Then you're with me tonight." Time slowed. The party noise faded to background static. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and mechanical, like server fans in a quiet data center. This was the moment, the revelation, the confirmation of suspicions I'd been suppressing for months. I didn't argue, didn't protest or make a scene. Instead, I pulled an empty chair from a nearby table and positioned it directly beside my wife. The metal legs scraped against the concrete floor with a sound like fingernails on glass. Everyone stared as I sat down, pulled out my phone, and placed it on the cocktail table between us. The screen showed my voice recording app, red dot blinking, timestamp clearly visible. "Please continue," I said calmly. "I'm just getting comfortable." Hayes's confident expression flickered. "Mason, I think there might be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding at all." I tapped the phone screen, ensuring the recording was properly synced to cloud storage. "You just invited my wife to spend the evening with you, at a company party, in front of witnesses. I'd like to hear more about these commitments." Elara tried to laugh, the sound brittle and forced. "Mason, don't be silly. Hayes was just what?" I interrupted. "Making plans? Scheduling another late-night strategy session? Please, elaborate, for the record." The silence stretched between us, tight and uncomfortable. Other guests began to notice our small standoff, nearby conversations fading as attention drifted toward our table. Hayes glanced around nervously, his social confidence dissolving under the sudden scrutiny. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he suggested. "Why?" I asked. "You made your invitation publicly. Seems appropriate to respond publicly." I opened my phone's contact list and scrolled to Sophie Martinez, our family attorney. With deliberate movements, I created a new message thread and attached the audio file that was still recording. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., location services enabled, guest list from Elara's email invitation automatically copied from my photo gallery. "Mason, stop!" Elara hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I looked around our circle. Jenna, Vera, you both seem to understand what's happening here. Care to clarify for those of us who might be confused? Jenna's face went pale. Vera suddenly found her champagne glass fascinating. They'd been enjoying the show when I was the unwitting audience, but direct participation was apparently less appealing. "This is ridiculous," Hayes said, his voice rising slightly. "I was simply suggesting that Elara and I continue our business discussion over dinner. Nothing inappropriate about that." "Business discussion," I repeated, still recording. At 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night. About the Henderson account, I assume? The one that required all those long strategy sessions? That's right. Excellent. I smiled for the first time that evening. Then you won't mind if I join you. I'd love to hear more about Pinnacle's client relations strategies. Hayes's jaw tightened. That wouldn't be appropriate. Confidential client information, you understand? Of course. Confidential. I nodded thoughtfully. Like those weekend strategy retreats? The ones that coincidentally align with my business travel schedule? Elara's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the concrete floor. The sound cut through the party noise like a gunshot, drawing more attention to our corner of the rooftop. I think you've had too much to drink, she said quickly. Actually, this is my first glass of wine, but thank you for your concern. I gestured to the bartender, a stocky man with sleeve tattoos who'd been watching our exchange with obvious interest. Excuse me, Benny, right? Could you note the table number and time for me? Table 7, 9:52 p.m. Benny nodded slowly. Sure thing, buddy. Table 7, 9:52 p.m. Anything else you need? Just a witness statement if anyone asks later. Hayes stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. This is insane. I don't have to listen to paranoid accusations from some what? I asked quietly. He caught himself before finishing the sentence, but his expression completed the thought. Some nobody. Some technical support husband who didn't understand how the real world worked. Some obstacle to be managed and dismissed. Some concerned husband, he finished lamely. Exactly. I stood as well, pocketing my phone but leaving the recording active. And as a concerned husband, I want to thank you, Hayes. Both of you, actually. Elara looked confused. Thank us? For making things so clear, for being so transparent about your professional relationship. It really helps with decision-making. I turned to address our small audience of colleagues and friends. Could everyone please note the time? 9:54 p.m., Friday evening, Meridian Hotel rooftop. Hayes Rellin, creative director of Pinnacle Communications, just invited my wife Elara to spend the evening with him. She accepted. I want to make sure we're all clear on the timeline. Several people nodded, their faces reflecting various degrees of shock, embarrassment, and guilty fascination. This was the kind of workplace drama that would fuel gossip for months. Mason, please, Elara whispered. Don't do this. Do what? Document the truth? Record actual events as they happen? I shrugged. I'm just being thorough. Professional habit. Hayes had recovered some of his composure. You're making a fool of yourself, Mason, and you're damaging your wife's reputation over nothing. Her reputation is her responsibility, I replied. Just like her choices. I pulled out my business card holder and extracted 2 cards, placing them on the cocktail table beside the broken champagne glass. My contact information, in case anyone needs to verify details later. I'll be available for questions. Then I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I smiled, genuinely this time, and extended my hand to Hayes. Thank you again for the clarity, I said as he reluctantly shook my hand. You've been incredibly helpful. Without another word, I walked away from the table, through the crowd of staring faces, past the jazz quartet, and toward the elevator bank. Behind me, I could hear urgent whispers and the sound of chairs being moved. The elevator arrived immediately, as if summoned by dramatic necessity. As the doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of the rooftop party. Elara standing frozen beside the broken glass, Hayes gesturing angrily at his phone, Jenna and Vera huddled together like conspirators whose plot had been exposed. The recording was still running. The evidence was already uploaded to cloud storage and copied to my attorney. The guest list was documented. The timeline was established. The party was over, but the real work was just beginning. I drove home through empty suburban streets, my mind running calculations like a computer processing data. The recording from the party was already synced to 3 separate cloud accounts, time-stamped and location verified. By the time I pulled into our driveway, copies were sitting in Sophie Martinez's secure email and my personal backup drives. Our house looked exactly the same as when we'd left 2 hours earlier. Colonial style, 2 stories, perfectly manicured lawn that Elara insisted we maintain for property values. Everything normal and suburban and completely false. I sat in the car for 10 minutes organizing my thoughts and priorities. First, secure all financial accounts and change passwords. Second, document everything I could remember about Elara's recent behavior patterns. Third, prepare for the conversation that was coming when she returned home. The front door opened into our living room, all beige furniture and carefully arranged family photos. Pictures of our wedding, vacation trips, holiday celebrations, 7 years of shared history that now felt like elaborate theater. I'd been performing the role of devoted husband, while my wife auditioned for different parts entirely. My home office occupied the converted bedroom upstairs. 3 monitors, 2 laptops, external drives, networking equipment, the command center where I managed client systems and, apparently, where I'd be managing the dissolution of my marriage. I opened a new document and began typing. Timeline of suspicious behavior. Elara Reddan, January 2024. Started mentioning Hayes Rellin frequently in conversation. Hayes thinks became a common phrase. Work schedule became increasingly unpredictable. February 2024. First weekend strategy session coincided with my client trip to Denver. Elara claimed it was mandatory for all senior staff, later discovered she was the only attendee. March 2024. New wardrobe purchases, expensive lingerie that I never saw her wear at home. Credit card statements showed charges at Victoria's Secret, Nordstrom, high-end restaurants on days she claimed to be working late. April 2024. Began receiving text messages at odd hours that she would quickly dismiss as work emergencies. Started taking phone calls in the garage or basement, claiming better reception. May 2024. Overnight business trip to Chicago with Hayes. Hotel records would be interesting to review. Returned with conference materials that looked suspiciously unused. The list continued for 3 pages. Patterns emerged like code structure, logical and predictable once you understood the underlying architecture. Elara had been methodical about her deception, but not careful enough to avoid leaving traces. I opened our joint banking account and reviewed recent transactions. The expensive dinners were there, always charged to her corporate card, but at restaurants far from Pinnacle's offices. Hotel charges in the city despite our house being 30 minutes away. Spa treatments, salon appointments, shopping sprees that coincided with my business travel. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Hayes. We need to talk." I screenshot the message and saved it to my evidence folder before responding. All communication should go through attorneys. Mine is Sophie Martinez at Martinez & Associates. The response came immediately. "Don't be ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding between adults." Another screenshot, another save. "No misunderstanding. Everything was quite clear at the party. You're making a mistake, Mason. Think about your wife's career." I laughed out loud in my empty office. "I'm thinking about many things. Her career is her responsibility." The typing indicators showed Hayes composing and deleting several responses. Finally, "We should meet in person." "No. All future communication goes through legal counsel." I blocked the number and added the screenshots to my growing evidence file. Hayes was panicking, which meant he understood the implications of what had happened at the party. Good. Panic led to mistakes, and mistakes created opportunities. My email notification chimed. Sophie Martinez had responded to my earlier message with typical efficiency. Mason reviewed the audio file. Very clear evidence of inappropriate workplace behavior and potential adultery. Can you document financial irregularities? Also need complete employment records for both parties. Call me first thing Monday morning. I spent the next hour compiling financial documents, employment contracts, and communication records. Everything organized, labeled, and backed up to multiple locations. If this was going to be a war, I'd fight it with superior intelligence and preparation. At 11:30 p.m., I heard Elara's car in the driveway. She entered quietly, probably hoping I'd already gone to bed. Instead, I was waiting in the living room with a manila envelope and a glass of wine. Just one glass. Mason? Her voice was tentative, uncertain. We need to talk. Yes, we do. I gestured to the envelope on the coffee table. But first, you need to read these. She approached slowly, still wearing the black cocktail dress from the party. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled. She looked like someone who'd spent the evening having difficult conversations. What is this? She asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Separation papers, temporary custody arrangements for shared assets, formal notification of my intent to file for divorce based on adultery and breach of marital contract. Elara's face went white. Mason, please, tonight was just what? A joke? A misunderstanding? A moment of poor judgment? I kept my voice level, conversational. Because I have a recording that suggests otherwise. She sank into the armchair across from me, the separation papers clutched in her trembling hands. You recorded us? I recorded a public conversation at a company party, completely legal in this state, as you know. This is insane. You're destroying our marriage over nothing. I'm not destroying anything, Elara. I'm documenting what's already been destroyed. I pulled out my phone and showed her the voice recording app. Would you like to hear it again? The part where Hayes invited you to spend the evening with him? Or your response accepting the invitation? It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Then explain it. Help me understand how my wife accepting another man's romantic invitation at a public party could be misinterpreted. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She tried several responses, starting and stopping like a broken program caught in an error loop. Finally, Hayes was just being friendly. It's office politics, Mason. Networking. Networking, I nodded thoughtfully. Is that what you call those weekend strategy sessions? The overnight trips? The expensive dinners at romantic restaurants? Her silence was answer enough. I've reviewed our financial records, I continued. Credit card statements, bank transactions, travel expenses. Very interesting patterns, Elara. Very consistent with someone maintaining a relationship outside their marriage. You had no right to spy on me. I had every right to review accounts with my name on them, joint assets, shared financial responsibility, all perfectly legal and completely documented. I stood and walked to the window overlooking our perfectly manicured suburban street. I've also filed a formal complaint with Pinnacle's HR department regarding Hayes' inappropriate workplace conduct, hostile work environment, abuse of supervisory authority, potential harassment of subordinate employees. You didn't. Her voice was barely a whisper. I did, complete with witness statements, audio evidence, and documentation of the pattern of behavior. Hayes will be suspended pending investigation by Monday morning. Elara began crying then, not the gentle tears of remorse, but the harsh sobs of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no satisfaction, just the cold efficiency of a system administrator cleaning up corrupted files. Mason, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can work through it. No, I said simply. We can't. Why not? People have affairs, Mason. It happens. We can go to counseling. This wasn't an affair, Elara. This was a performance. You've been playing a role for months, maybe years. Tonight, you just forgot your lines. I returned to my chair and picked up the wine glass. The separation papers give you 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements. I'm keeping the house, the joint accounts, and all shared assets pending final divorce proceedings. You can't do that. Actually, I can. Adultery affects asset distribution in this state. Sophie explained the relevant statutes quite clearly. Elara looked at the papers again, scanning the legal language that would reshape both our lives. What about my job, my career? What about it? If Hayes gets fired, if there's a scandal, then you'll deal with the consequences of your choices. I finished my wine and stood. Just like I'm dealing with the consequences of mine. What's that supposed to mean? It means I chose to marry someone I thought I knew, someone I trusted, someone who turned out to be an excellent actress. I walked toward the stairs, then paused. The locks will be changed tomorrow morning. Your personal belongings will be packed and available for pickup by arrangement through our attorneys. Mason, wait. But I was already climbing the stairs, leaving her alone with the separation papers and the wreckage of her carefully orchestrated deception. Behind me, I could hear her making phone calls, her voice desperate and pleading. I closed the bedroom door and activated the white noise app on my phone. Whatever conversations she was having downstairs were no longer my concern. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new opportunities for justice. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. Monday morning arrived with the efficiency of a system reboot. I was awake at 5:30 a.m., showered and dressed before Elara stirred on the living room couch where she'd spent the weekend. The locksmith would arrive at 8 a.m. sharp. By 8:30, she'd be officially locked out of what had been our shared home for 7 years. My phone showed 14 missed calls and 23 text messages from various numbers: Elara, Hayes, Jenna, Vera, and several colleagues from Pinnacle Communications. I deleted them all without reading and activated a new voicemail message. You've reached Mason Reddan. All personal matters should be directed through Martinez and Associates. All business inquiries will be returned within 24 hours. Professional, clean, impersonal. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I reviewed my action items for the day. Sophie Martinez expected me at 9 a.m. with complete documentation. The HR complaint against Hayes would be processed by Pinnacle's legal department. Elara's access to our joint accounts had been suspended at midnight. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Mason? Elara's voice drifted from the living room, hoarse from crying and phone calls. Can we please talk? The locksmith arrives in 2 hours, I called back. I'd suggest using that time to pack essentials. This is my home too. Not anymore. I heard her moving around downstairs, opening drawers and closets, the sounds of someone gathering possessions in a hurry. Good. Urgency would prevent her from thinking clearly, from developing effective countermeasures. My laptop chimed with a new email from an address I didn't recognize. Rellin, personalogmail.com. Mason. This has gone far enough. Meet me at Starbucks on 5th Street at 10 a.m. We can resolve this like adults. Don't destroy 3 careers over a misunderstanding. Hayes. I forwarded the email to Sophie Martinez with a note. Continued contact despite explicit instructions. Please advise on restraining order procedures. Her response came within minutes. Documented. Do not respond or meet. Let him dig his own grave. At 7:45 a.m., I carried my coffee outside to wait for the locksmith. The morning was crisp and clear, suburban lawns sparkling with dew, neighbors beginning their daily routines. Mr. Peterson next door waved from his driveway. Mrs. Chen walked her golden retriever past our front yard, everything normal and peaceful and completely oblivious to the drama unfolding behind our colonial facade. The locksmith arrived precisely on time, an efficient woman named Carol who asked no questions and made no comments about the early morning timing. Standard lock change, she confirmed, reviewing my work order. All exterior doors, garage entry, basement access. That's correct. How long will it take? About 90 minutes for everything. Perfect. That would give me time for my appointment with Sophie while ensuring Elara couldn't return to the house unsupervised. As Carol began working on the front door, Elara emerged with 2 suitcases and a garment bag. She looked exhausted, defeated, nothing like the confident marketing executive who dominated conversations at company parties. "This is really happening," she said, more to herself than to me. "Yes, it is. Mason, I know you're angry, but—" "I'm not angry, Elara. Anger is an emotional response. This is a logical one." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign of the man she'd married. "What happened to you?" "I learned the truth. About you, about Hayes, about what my marriage actually was." I checked my watch. "Carol, how much longer for the front door?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. "Excellent." I turned back to Elara. "You should probably leave soon. Traffic gets heavy after 8:30. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." The words came out colder than I'd intended, but they were accurate. Elara's housing situation was a consequence of her choices, not my responsibility. She'd made her decision at the party Friday night. Everything since then was just implementation. Carol finished the front door lock and moved to the garage entrance. Elara loaded her suitcases into her car, movements sharp and angry. She was transitioning from desperation to rage, a predictable emotional progression that would lead to mistakes. "This isn't over, Mason." "Yes, it is. I'll fight you on everything, the house, the accounts, the settlement. You won't get away with this." I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app, red light blinking. "Please continue. My attorney finds these conversations very helpful for establishing your state of mind." Elara's face flushed red. For a moment, I thought she might actually attack me physically. Instead, she got in her car and reversed out of the driveway with enough speed to leave rubber marks on the asphalt. Carol looked up from the garage lock. "Rough morning?" "Getting better by the minute." Sophie Martinez's office occupied the 3rd floor of a glass building downtown, all polished surfaces and expensive furniture designed to intimidate opposing counsel. Sophie herself was 40-something, sharp-featured, and possessed of the kind of focused intelligence that made weak arguments wither on contact. "Mason." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I've reviewed everything you sent over the weekend. Quite thorough documentation. I'm methodical by nature. It shows. The audio recording from the party is particularly damaging. Clear evidence of inappropriate workplace conduct and public admission of extramarital involvement." She opened a thick folder containing printouts of emails, financial records, and legal documents. "I've also reviewed Pinnacle Communications' employee handbook and ethics policies. Hayes Rellin violated at least 6 different workplace conduct standards." "What about the HR complaint?" "Filed this morning with supporting documentation. Pinnacle's legal department will be forced to investigate, which means Hayes will be suspended pending review. Standard corporate liability protection." I nodded. "Timeline for resolution?" "Depends on how aggressively they want to fight. The evidence is overwhelming, so most likely they'll settle quickly to avoid publicity. Hayes will probably be terminated, Elara will be reassigned or encouraged to resign." "And the divorce proceedings?" Sophie smiled for the first time that morning. "Adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. Combined with the financial evidence and workplace misconduct, you're looking at a very favorable settlement. Elara will be lucky to get 30% of marital assets." "How long?" 6 months, maybe less if she doesn't contest, which she might not, given the strength of our evidence. We spent another hour reviewing strategy and timeline. Sophie would handle all communication with Elara's attorney once she retained one. The HR investigation would proceed independently, but would likely support our divorce case. Hayes's career was effectively over, regardless of legal outcomes. "One more thing," Sophie said as I prepared to leave. "Expect escalation. People don't usually accept this kind of exposure quietly. Elara and Hayes will probably try to retaliate somehow." Let them try. I'm serious, Mason. Document everything. Record all conversations. Don't meet with either of them alone. I assured her I'd be careful and left the office feeling more optimistic than I had in months. The legal machinery was in motion. Evidence was documented, and my opponents were making predictable mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. The message came from a Gmail account I didn't recognize, but the content was familiar. Photographs from Friday night's party, including several shots of me recording our conversation. Someone had been documenting the evening from multiple angles. The accompanying message was brief. Thought you might want to see how this looked from outside your little bubble. You're not the only one who can gather evidence. Vera, one of Elara's friends from the party. I'd assumed she was just another gossipy colleague, but apparently she'd been more observant than I'd realized. I forwarded the email to Sophie with a note about potential witness testimony, then called the number that had texted me. Vera, this is Mason Reddan. I was wondering when you'd call. Her voice was different than I remembered from the party, less giggly, more calculating. We should meet. Why? Because I have information you need, and you have leverage I want. Interesting. What kind of information? The kind that proves Friday night wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the end of something that's been going on for months. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near Pinnacle's offices, neutral territory where we could talk without interruption. Vera was already waiting when I arrived, looking nervous but determined. Before we start, she said, I want you to know I never liked what was happening. But Elara's my colleague and Hayes was untouchable at the company. Until now? Until now. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through a series of photos and screenshots. Elara's been bragging about her relationship with Hayes for months. Private messages, photos from their trips, details about their encounters. The evidence was damning. Text message conversations between Elara and Vera discussing Hayes' preferences, his gifts, his promises about career advancement. Photos from hotel rooms and restaurants I recognized from our credit card statements. A complete record of an affair conducted with casual arrogance. Why are you showing me this? Vera's expression hardened. Because Hayes promised me a promotion that went to Elara instead. Because she's been treating everyone else like servants while playing queen of the office. Because I'm tired of watching her get away with everything. I photographed each piece of evidence with Vera's permission, adding them to my growing file. This was beyond adultery now. It was systematic workplace corruption, abuse of authority, and fraud. There's more, Vera continued. Hayes has done this before. 3 other women in the past 5 years, all junior employees, all promised career advancement in exchange for personal attention. Do you have proof? Some. Enough to establish a pattern. She hesitated. But I want something in return. What? I want Hayes destroyed completely, not just fired. I want him unemployable, unmarketable, finished in this industry. I considered her proposal. Vera's evidence would strengthen my case exponentially, but aligning with her meant accepting her agenda as well as her information. What exactly are you proposing? Full cooperation. I'll testify in your divorce proceedings, provide all the evidence I've collected, and help you document Hayes' pattern of abuse. In exchange, you make sure this story gets maximum exposure. Meaning? Meaning when Hayes falls, he falls hard enough that everyone in the industry knows why. I agreed to her terms. Vera's evidence was too valuable to ignore, and her motivations aligned with my objectives. Hayes had built his career on exploitation and manipulation. Time to show him how it felt to be on the receiving end. We spent 2 hours reviewing documents, photographs, and witness statements. By the time I left the coffee shop, I had enough evidence to destroy both Hayes and Elara completely. The game was no longer about divorce or adultery. It was about justice, accountability, and the systematic dismantling of 2 people who'd thought themselves untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. Tuesday morning brought news that Hayes Rellin had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The information came through Vera, who'd positioned herself as my inside source at Pinnacle Communications. According to office gossip, Hayes had spent Monday morning in emergency meetings with HR and legal counsel before being escorted from the building with his personal belongings in a cardboard box. He looked like someone had run over his dog, Vera reported during our phone call. Kept muttering about lawsuits and wrongful termination. Security had to remind him twice to surrender his key card. What about Elara? Suspended without pay. They're calling it pending resolution of related workplace conduct issues. She cleaned out her desk yesterday afternoon. Perfect. Both of my targets were now professionally isolated, financially stressed, and legally vulnerable. Exactly where I wanted them. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Mason, this is Hayes. I know you don't want to talk to me, but we need to resolve this situation before it gets out of hand. Meet me at the Meridian Hotel bar tonight at 8. Come alone. The same hotel where their company party had been held Friday night. Hayes was either sentimental or stupid. Possibly both. I called Sophie Martinez immediately. Don't even think about it, she said after I'd played the voicemail. This has trap written all over it. Maybe, but it might also be an opportunity. For what? Getting yourself into a situation where it's your word against his? I considered her warning, but something about Hayes's tone suggested desperation rather than aggression. People made their worst mistakes when they were desperate. What if I wore a wire? Absolutely not. Too risky, and anything obtained that way might not be admissible. Then what if I just recorded openly, like I did at the party? Sophie was quiet for a moment. If you're determined to do this, and I strongly advise against it, then yes, open recording would be legal. But Mason, this feels like escalation. He might be planning something. Let him plan. I'll be ready. Against Sophie's advice, I agreed to meet Hayes at the Meridian Hotel bar, but I wouldn't be going alone. Vera agreed to position herself at a nearby table as a witness, and I arranged for Benny, the bartender from Friday night's party, to work the evening shift. Home field advantage. The Meridian's bar was elegant and dimly lit, all leather chairs and polished wood designed to facilitate discreet business conversations. Hayes was already waiting when I arrived, looking haggard and desperate. His usual confidence had been replaced by nervous energy, fingers drumming against his whiskey glass. Mason. He stood as I approached, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. I ignored the handshake and took the chair across from him, placing my phone on the table with the recording app clearly visible. You have 30 minutes. This doesn't have to be adversarial. It already is adversarial. You made it adversarial when you propositioned my wife at a public event. Hayes winced. That was poor judgment. I'd had too much to drink. The party atmosphere. Stop. I held up my hand. Don't insult my intelligence with excuses. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was the culmination of a months-long affair conducted with complete disregard for professional ethics or basic human decency. You don't understand the pressures of corporate life, Mason. The relationships, the networking, the abuse of authority, the quid pro quo arrangements with subordinate employees, the systematic exploitation of your position for personal gratification. Hayes's face went pale. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Sarah Chen from the Seattle office. I know about Jennifer Walsh from the Chicago branch. I know about Lisa Rodriguez from the local team. I pulled out a folder containing Vera's evidence. 3 other women, Hayes. 3 other junior employees who received special attention from their creative director. Those are mischaracterizations, professional relationships that followed the exact same pattern as your relationship with Elara. Private dinners, weekend retreats, promises of career advancement, and intimate personal involvement. Hayes drained his whiskey glass and signaled for another. His hands were shaking slightly. and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the bar's cool temperature. "What do you want, Mason?" "I want you to understand that this isn't just about my marriage anymore. This is about accountability. You've spent years using your position to manipulate and exploit women who trusted you with their careers. I never forced anyone. You didn't have to. You controlled their advancement, their assignments, their professional futures. That's coercion, Hayes. That's abuse of power." The bartender, Benny, as arranged, brought Hayes his fresh drink and gave me a subtle nod. Everything was being observed, documented, recorded. "I can make this go away," Hayes said suddenly. "The HR investigation, the complaints, all of it. I have connections, influence." "You had influence?" "Past tense. Right now, you're just another middle-aged executive whose career is circling the drain. I'm offering you a deal, Mason. A generous settlement, full custody of marital assets, whatever you want from Elara. In exchange, you drop the complaints and let this fade away quietly." I leaned back in my chair, studying his desperate expression. "You're offering to buy me off." "I'm offering to resolve this like adults. With other people's money. Elara doesn't have assets to offer. I already control our joint accounts. You're talking about corporate settlement funds, aren't you? Pinnacle's legal department authorized you to make this offer." Hayes's silence confirmed my suspicion. The company was panicking, trying to contain the scandal before it spread beyond their ability to manage. "How much?" I asked. 200,000, full confidentiality agreement, sealed records, no admission of wrongdoing." "Interesting." I pretended to consider the offer while my phone continued recording every word. "And what happens to the other women? Sarah, Jennifer, Lisa? Do they get similar offers to stay quiet about their experiences?" "That's not your concern." "Actually, it is. Because if you're willing to pay 200,000 to make my case disappear, you're probably willing to pay similar amounts to silence other victims. That suggests a pattern of systematic abuse that goes far beyond my personal situation." Hayes realized his mistake immediately. By offering corporate settlement money, he'd essentially admitted that Pinnacle knew about his history of inappropriate conduct and was actively trying to cover it up. I didn't say, "You didn't have to. It's all recorded, Hayes. Every word, every admission, every attempt to obstruct justice with corporate bribe money." I stood and pocketed my phone. "Thank you for this conversation. It's been very illuminating." "Mason, wait." But I was already walking away, leaving him alone with his whiskey and his panic. Behind me, I could hear him making urgent phone calls, probably to corporate counsel or crisis management consultants. Outside the hotel, Vera was waiting by the valet stand. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected?" Hayes just admitted that Pinnacle has been covering up his pattern of abuse for years. They're so desperate to contain this scandal that they authorized a $200,000 bribe. Vera's eyes widened. "That's huge. Corporate conspiracy to conceal harassment." "Exactly. This isn't just about my divorce anymore. This is about exposing systematic corruption at one of the city's largest marketing firms." We walked to the parking garage together, discussing strategy and next steps. The evidence was overwhelming now. Not just adultery, but workplace harassment, abuse of authority, and corporate cover-up attempts. "What happens next?" Vera asked. "Now we go public. Media exposure, regulatory complaints, whatever it takes to ensure this story gets the attention it deserves." "And Hayes?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Hayes is about to discover that some problems can't be solved with money and influence." My phone buzzed with a text message from Elara. "We need to talk, tonight. It's important." I showed the message to Vera, who shook her head. "Another trap?" "Probably. But after tonight's conversation with Hayes, I'm feeling confident about my ability to handle desperate people making bad decisions." I texted back, "All communication through attorneys. You know this." Her response came immediately. "This is about Hayes, about what he's planning. You're in danger, Mason." Interesting. Either Elara was genuinely concerned for my safety, or she was trying a different manipulation strategy. Given her track record, I assumed the latter. Still going through attorneys, I replied. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. I forwarded the exchange to Sophie Martinez with a note about potential threats or intimidation attempts. If Hayes was planning some kind of retaliation, I wanted everything documented and prepared. But as I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I felt more optimistic than I had in weeks. The evidence was overwhelming, the legal case was solid, and my opponents were making increasingly desperate mistakes. Hayes and Elara had underestimated me from the beginning, treating me like an obstacle to be managed rather than an adversary to be respected. They were about to learn the cost of that arrogance. The game was almost over, and I was winning. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing legal documents in my home office when the doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Through the security camera feed, I could see a woman in an expensive business suit standing on my front porch. Someone I didn't recognize, but who carried herself with the confidence of authority. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain engaged. Mr. Reddan, I'm Miranda Rellin, Hayes' wife. We need to talk. This was not what I'd expected. Miranda Rellin was elegant in the way that old money often is, understated jewelry, perfectly tailored clothing, the kind of quiet sophistication that suggested generational wealth rather than nouveau riche ostentation. She looked nothing like the victim I'd imagined. Mrs. Rellin, this is unexpected. May I come in? I have information that might interest you. Against my better judgment, I disengaged the chain and let her enter. She surveyed my living room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating real estate and social status. Nice home. Very suburban. Thank you. Can I ask what brings you here? Miranda settled into the armchair that Elara had occupied during our final conversation, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. I want to discuss our mutual problem. Which is? Hayes, and your wife, and the situation that's about to destroy both our marriages. I remained standing, maintaining physical and psychological advantage. I'm not sure we have mutual interests, Mrs. Rellin. Oh, but we do. She opened her purse and withdrew a thick folder. I've been documenting my husband's extramarital activities for the past 18 months. Professional investigators, financial records, photographic evidence, everything needed for a very expensive divorce. She handed me the folder. Inside were surveillance photos, credit card statements, hotel records, and detailed reports from private investigators. The documentation was extensive and damning, covering not just Hayes' relationship with Elara, but several other affairs spanning multiple years. This is impressive, I admitted. Very thorough. I learned long ago that knowledge is power, Mr. Reddan, especially when dealing with men who think they're smarter than everyone around them. I studied her carefully. Miranda Rellin was not the naive, betrayed wife I'd expected. She was calculating, prepared, and possibly more dangerous than her husband. What exactly are you proposing? Cooperation. You want to destroy Hayes professionally and personally. I want to take him for everything he's worth in divorce court. Our objectives align perfectly. And Elara? Miranda's smile was cold. Your wife is collateral damage. Unfortunate, but necessary. We spent the next hour reviewing her evidence and discussing strategy. Miranda had been planning her husband's destruction for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. My public confrontation at the party had provided that moment. Hayes is meeting with crisis management consultants this afternoon, she informed me, trying to develop a strategy for containing the scandal. They're recommending he throw Elara under the bus, claim she seduced him, that he was the victim of workplace harassment. Interesting approach. Desperate approach. But it might work if Elara doesn't have adequate legal representation. I considered this information. If Hayes successfully portrayed himself as the victim, it could complicate my divorce proceedings and potentially reduce my settlement. Unless, what if Elara had access to evidence that contradicted Hayes's version of events? Miranda's smile widened. You mean evidence like this? She produced another folder containing emails, text messages, and audio recordings. Hayes is many things, but he's not technologically sophisticated. He never realized I had access to his phone records and email accounts. The evidence was devastating. Messages from Hayes to Elara outlining their relationship, making explicit demands, and promising career advancement in exchange for personal favors. Everything needed to prove that he was the aggressor, not the victim. Why would you give this to me? Because if Elara uses it to defend herself, it strengthens your position while simultaneously destroying Hayes's credibility. Everyone wins, except my husband. I was beginning to understand that Miranda Rellin was far more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. She wasn't just seeking divorce. She was orchestrating the complete destruction of a man who'd underestimated her for years. There's one more thing, she said, producing a final document. Hayes has been embezzling company funds to pay for his affairs. Hotel rooms, gifts, travel expenses, all charged to fake client accounts. Pinnacle's accounting department hasn't caught it yet, but they will once someone points them in the right direction. You're talking about criminal charges. I'm talking about justice, Mr. Reddan. Hayes has spent years using his position to exploit women and steal from his employer. Time for him to face consequences. We agreed to coordinate our efforts. Miranda would provide evidence to support both my divorce case and the criminal investigation into Hayes's embezzlement. In return, I would ensure that the media coverage of the scandal included details about his pattern of abuse and financial crimes. After Miranda left, I called Sophie Martinez to brief her on this unexpected development. This changes everything, Sophie said after reviewing the new evidence. With Miranda's documentation, we can prove systematic abuse, financial fraud, and corporate conspiracy. Hayes isn't just looking at unemployment, he's looking at prison time. And Elara? Still guilty of adultery, but now she's also a victim of workplace harassment. That might actually help her in divorce court, but it won't save her career. I spent the afternoon organizing the evidence and preparing for what I expected would be the final phase of this conflict. Hayes and Elara were about to face the full weight of their choices, supported by overwhelming documentation and credible witnesses. At 6 p.m., my doorbell rang again. This time it was Elara, looking desperate and exhausted. She'd lost weight over the past week, and her usually perfect appearance showed signs of stress and sleepless nights. Mason, please. Just 5 minutes. All communication goes through. I know about Miranda, she interrupted. I know she came to see you this morning. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. What about it? She's using you, Mason. Using both of us. Miranda doesn't care about justice or truth. She just wants to destroy Hayes completely. And she's willing to destroy everyone else in the process, including you. Elara pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. Look at these. Miranda's been in contact with Hayes's other victims, coordinating their stories, promising them money if they testify against him. I read the messages carefully. They showed Miranda actively recruiting witnesses and potentially coaching their testimony, behavior that could undermine the entire case if discovered by opposing counsel. She's also been feeding information to reporters, Elara continued. This whole thing is going to become a media circus, Mason. Your name, your personal life, everything will be public record. This was concerning. I'd wanted Hayes and Elara to face consequences for their actions, but I hadn't considered the possibility of becoming a public figure in a corporate scandal. What are you proposing? Let's settle this privately. Between us, without Miranda's manipulation or media attention. You get the divorce you want, I accept responsibility for my mistakes, and we both move on with our lives. It was tempting. A clean, private resolution would avoid the circus of a public trial and media coverage. But it would also mean that Hayes escaped serious consequences for years of abuse and financial crimes. What about Hayes? Hayes is finished either way. Pinnacle will fire him, his reputation is destroyed, and Miranda will take him apart in divorce court. But at least we don't have to be part of the public spectacle. I considered her offer while studying her face. Elara looked genuinely remorseful for the first time since this began, but she'd also proven herself to be an accomplished manipulator. I need to think about it, I said finally. Don't think too long, Mason. Miranda's scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. Once this goes public, there's no controlling the narrative. After Elara left, I called Sophie to discuss this new development. She's right about the media attention, Sophie confirmed. High-profile corporate scandals generate significant coverage, especially when they involve workplace harassment and embezzlement. You'd become a public figure whether you want to or not. And Miranda's witness coaching? Potentially problematic. If opposing counsel can prove she's been manipulating testimony, it could undermine our entire case. I had a decision to make. Accept Elara's offer of private settlement and avoid public exposure, or proceed with Miranda's plan and risk becoming the center of a media circus. But as I reviewed all the evidence I'd collected over the past week, the recordings, the financial documents, the witness statements, I realized that this had never been just about my marriage. It had been about accountability, justice, and ensuring that people like Hayes faced consequences for their actions. Schedule the press conference, I told Sophie, but make sure we control the narrative. This story gets told our way, with our evidence and our witnesses. Are you sure about this, Mason? I'm sure. Hayes and Elara made their choices publicly, at that party. It's appropriate that they face the consequences publicly as well. Thursday afternoon, I stood behind a podium in Sophie Martinez's conference room, facing a crowd of reporters and television cameras. Miranda Rellin sat to my right, elegant and composed. Vera sat to my left, nervous but determined. Behind us, easels displayed charts and documents supporting our allegations. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, thank you for coming. My name is Mason Reddan, and I'm here to discuss systematic workplace abuse, financial fraud, and corporate cover-up at Pinnacle Communications. I told the story methodically, starting with the party confrontation and proceeding through the evidence of Hayes's pattern of abuse. Miranda provided details about the financial crimes. Vera testified about the toxic workplace culture that enabled harassment. The questions from reporters were sharp and focused. They understood that this wasn't just another corporate scandal. It was a case study in how abuse of power operates in modern workplaces. Mr. Reddan, one reporter asked, some people might say you're just a bitter husband seeking revenge on his cheating wife. How do you respond to that characterization? I'd say they're missing the point, I replied. This isn't about my marriage. This is about a system that allowed a senior executive to exploit his position for years while his employer looked the other way. My wife was a victim of that system, even though she made bad choices within it. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. By evening, the story was leading local news broadcasts and trending on social media. Hayes Rellin's name became synonymous with corporate corruption and workplace abuse. 2 days later, Hayes was arrested on embezzlement charges. Pinnacle Communications announced a complete review of their workplace policies and the termination of several executives who'd been aware of Hayes's behavior. Elara called me that evening, her voice barely a whisper. You destroyed us both, Mason. No, I replied. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented the process. Was it worth it? All this public attention? All this damage? I considered her question while looking out at my quiet suburban street, where neighbors were walking dogs and children were playing in front yards. Normal life continuing, despite the chaos we'd created. Ask me in a year, I said, and hung up. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Elara received 25% of our marital assets and moved to another city to rebuild her career. Hayes was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to Pinnacle Communications. Miranda got everything she wanted in her divorce settlement and sent me a thank you card with a handwritten note. Justice is expensive, but it's worth every penny. I kept the house, the financial accounts, and my reputation intact. More importantly, I'd learned something valuable about the difference between being smart and being wise, between accepting injustice and demanding accountability. The party where this all began felt like it had happened years ago instead of months. But sometimes, late at night, I'd remember Hayes's smirk and Elara's casual acceptance of his proposition, and I'd smile. They'd thought I was just another technical support husband who could be dismissed and ignored. They'd learned otherwise, and that education had cost them everything. It was, I reflected, a very expensive lesson, but some knowledge is worth any price.